in NBA history. The rivalry renewed. Under 9 minutes to go in the second quarter. This was really a turning point because the Sixers had an 8-point lead and maybe looking to add to it. But watch this as James Harden goes up. He collides, I would say inadvertently, with the nose of Jaylen Brown. And that is ultimately called a flagrant on Harden. And from that moment forward, everything shifted back in the other direction. We're late in the second, and that's Brown going back the other way. He would score 25. The fans in Boston loved it as the Celtics extended their lead, and then extended farther they would. Jason Tatum, an enormous first half, 25 points as he knocks down those three, but he was just getting warmed up. This was a game at the break. It was no longer about 2 minutes into the third quarter, and that man was the reason why. Jason Tatum went flat nuts in the third quarter. Here he comes, knocking down another three over Embiid. Tatum himself can't believe what he's doing. At that moment, he'd outscored the Sixers 8-3 in the third quarter. But wait, there's more. A few minutes later, Tatum, again, he had 13 points in the third at that point to just 6 from Philadelphia. Later in the third, the lead is ballooned to 25. More from Tatum. He had 42 through the first 3 quarters. Not pictured anything from Philadelphia because they didn't do anything. Celtics, meanwhile, had only one thing left to do. This is Tatum for 50, and he's got it. Adding one more for good measure. 51 points for Jason Tatum, the most ever in a Game 7. A nice hug for Mom on Mother's Day there. The embrace from Joel Embiid, and the end of a very disappointing day for the 76ers. Let's talk for a moment about Tatum. Steph Curry's Game 7 scoring record lasted exactly 2 weeks. Tatum also became the first Celtics player with multiple career 50-point playoff games. However, on the other side, this was a disappointing, dare I say, devastating finish to the season for Philadelphia and the MVP, Joel Embiid.
I got to be better, and I will be better. That's what I'm focused on. All of us, we got to, come back and find ways to just keep improving and, help the team. You can't win alone. I can't win alone. Me and James, we just can't win alone. That's why basketball is played 5-on-5. So, we just need everybody to just, try to keep finding ways to get better, and, we'll be fine.
Okay. Put your feet up. We got about 15 minutes commercial-free coming your way here in which to dissect this from every possible angle. And we'll do it with Woj and we'll do it with Vince Carter. But, Alan, I'm going to start with you because there was a certain irony yesterday in that it was the 10-year anniversary of Sam Hinkie, who once upon a time was the general manager of the 76ers, uttering 3 words that became somewhat legendary and in many cases overwhelmingly despised in sports, which were trust the process. It was yesterday, the end of the process once and for all.
Yes, Greeny, the process is dead, and the NBA should be celebrating this. Because if you think about it, the process after 10 years of resulting in no championships, not even getting to a conference finals, ends up nothing but a shell game. I mean, this to me was like a scam. It was a fantasy, and it was a coping mechanism for losing. Let's think about this for a minute. And fans embrace the idea of losing because it would eventually lead to winning. But what happens when you accept losing as a franchise? You never develop a winning mentality. You never develop that standard of winning. And the thing with when you're a general manager, you're always kicking the can down the road. So it's for lottery picks. It's the currency of hope, right? Like that's what it's about selling at that point. But that hope never led to any type of significant winning. So imagine fans celebrating losing. It was so bad of a fad in this league that Adam Silver had to create a play-in tournament to incentivize winning. Think about that for a minute. A professional sports league had to incentivize winning. That's how big the process became in the league. And let's hope yesterday was the day it ended.
Yeah, in many ways, RIP, the process. We hated you from day one. And so Vince, let's talk for a moment there about that moment for Embiid. We saw the embrace. This was a player who finally believed, it certainly looked like everything was aligned for him to finally get it done. He had the win in that Game 5, so he had the advantage coming home. He finally got the MVP trophy that he wanted so badly and deserved. I voted for him. I think he was absolutely deserving of winning that award. How do you describe what happened to him over the last, let's call it 54 minutes of basketball in this series?
First and foremost, I'll say, he got what he wanted. But with that award comes a responsibility and a target. You're the MVP now, so they're going to make sure they stop the MVP night in and night out, particularly in the playoffs. You were great. You kicked our butt regular season. We're not going to allow you to do the same in the playoffs, so you have to adjust. And he said, we can't do it by ourselves, but James Harden won a game or two by himself.
Yep.
So his will, he has to figure out now, with being the most dominant player, the best player, how do you empower your team? How do you go out there and get your team a win? And I think that's going to be the adjustment for us. Like, and you guys, one thing I wanted to ask you said about the process.
Yeah.
Was the process for regular season?
Yeah.
Start winning? Because they did accomplish that. They started to win now to get themselves into the postseason. And then from there, now, I think now it's the learning process of how do we win in the playoffs, because it's a difference. Shaq always talked about whatever you're averaging in regular season, you have to bump that up a couple of points. I do agree with that.
Yeah.
Now, sometimes the inflation is tough because you're the center of attention.
Yeah.
He is the center of attention. So how do I adjust that? And some nights it's not going to be, but it's just like 15 points, 8 rebounds. I'm sorry, in a closeout game.
But it's more about, to me, it's about when your team needs it the most.
Exactly.
You recognize 33-10 quarter, and I took 4 shots.
That's where I was going with that.
It's game 6, and this is slipping away, and I touched the ball 1 time.
Yes.
Like, those are the moments that you expect your best player to emerge and say, like Keyshawn, get me the damn ball.
Saw at the very least that conference semifinal round as being a threshold, for Joel Embiid to get to at least a conference final. And you certainly saw the bracket anyway open up with Milwaukee out in a really a remarkable Miami team that's made a run. But I think either Boston or Philadelphia felt with Miami there was an opportunity, to get to the finals. And I think for the Sixer team, windows don't stay open forever. You've got Joel Embiid in his prime. He's been at an MVP level really for 3 years. He was the runner-up for 2 years before winning it this season. And especially with the uncertainty about James Harden's future in Philadelphia. I know Doc Rivers said yesterday, hey, this team, I think we have enough here, and this team still has more growth to do. But if James Harden walks out the door, he's not easily replaceable. They just can't go out into free agency. It doesn't create the kind of cap space. He's an all-star at this point. James Harden's an all-star level player, not an all-NBA player anymore. But this certainly makes it a challenge for the Sixers to look at a potential team next season, potentially without James Harden, and say we could be a better team or even as good of a team.
It's fascinating. Woj, stay with me. I need you all morning long for this. And one of the things I've learned from working with Woj all year long on NBA Countdown is that we'll sit here, fans like me will sit here and say, oh, get rid of this guy and get rid of that guy. Because in the moment, that's all you're thinking. And then Woj will just turn to me very quietly and say, okay, and then who are you going to get? Life doesn't work that way. I get it. I understand. We're not playing fantasy here. But let's point out one quick thing. The video we were showing you while Woj was talking is where the Sixers actually lost this series. They didn't lose this series yesterday. This series was lost Thursday night in the final half of the fourth quarter at home when they had every opportunity in the world to put the final nail in the coffin on a Celtic team that had Jason Tatum playing the worst game of his life. The juxtaposition is remarkable because Jason Tatum yesterday not only played the best game of his life, might have played the best game 7 we've ever seen anybody play. Thursday night, he couldn't throw the ball in the ocean, and the Sixers had every chance to put them away. And when that game was there to be won, Vince Carter, Joel Embiid didn't touch the ball at all. Literally didn't touch the ball at all.
And Greeny, I looked at that as we were showing those clips. I looked at it. So that pick and roll to the pop, him popping back for the jump shot.
Yeah.
They use that all.
Yes.
Here, you see the pick and roll.
Right.
There. Now it's like they're not helping. Everybody's crowding the paint and they're taking away that play. We're going to make somebody else get the ball. So now here's another one. All right?
It here. It's right there.
It was right there. So now, if I'm Joel Embiid and I'm not getting it, guess what I'm doing? When I set the pick and roll, I'm getting a little closer. Here, if you have to hand me the ball, like you said, get me the damn ball, I'm going to get a little closer. Now, that goes to coaching, one, and your point guard play. Your point guard has to understand at some point, I have to get Joel Embiid, the MVP, the ball. And I got to figure out a way how.
Well, you and I were talking this morning before we came in here, and you were telling me you played with Mark Jackson, you played with Steve Nash, you played with Jason Kidd. I think they may be 1, 2, and 3 on the all-time assist list. I should have looked at it, but they're right there at the top. Yes. And you told me every one of them, and here's right there, Jason Kidd. When things are going sideways, the point guard knows I got to get the franchise the ball.
Lawrence Frank did not have to say or think I need to run a play. J. Kidd knew. He would come to me like, go post him up, right? It don't matter. Doesn't matter where. Elbow, go post up. When you run down the court, turn. I'm gonna throw it to you early. I'm gonna get you the ball early. Now, Joel Embiid, we're talking about a 5-man, but here's a 5-man that can handle the ball in transition or whatever. Sometimes when you get the rebound as a guarded outlet, you're like, no, here, big fella, start the offense. You have to touch the ball, and that's what made the game so easy for me. In Toronto, I was more. I had the ball in my hand, had to figure out ways. When I got to New Jersey, it was just a different world because Jason Kidd threw you into open jump shots. Steve Nash threw you into Mark Jackson the same way. When I played with those guys, those are just their basketball IQ was just another level, and they understood regardless of the play. You know, he was like, I got it. And next thing you know, we break a play just to get a touch. Shoot the ball. He told me shoot the ball, whatever. Just get a touch because after you get a shot up, satisfy your star player. Then they start to set better screens to get open. They start to figure out ways to get open.
And so that's part of where it gets away from them yesterday. Quick thought on that, because, again, I cannot underline enough times. Look, the process, there are things about the process that in theory can work. That's why they had to change it. Well, in baseball, look, the Chicago Cubs did the process, the Houston Astros did the process, and you win. When you incentivize losing, you invite that upon yourself. And to your point, the league has had to make adjustments to get around that. The problem with the process, they kept drafting players who couldn't play. They made every conceivable mistake you could make. Embiid is literally the only one that they got right over the entire course of time, including, and the ultimate irony is that it's Jason Tatum who knocks them out yesterday because they wound up, and this is now legendary, you don't need me to tell you, they traded up from 3-1 to take Markelle Fultz in what now I think is going to go down as quite possibly the worst trade in the history of the NBA.
Yeah, the worst trade to move up to number 1 in the history of the NBA, if you think about that as well. And of course, it's the irony of the fact that the guy that you decided to pass on in the draft sent you home, the guy that dropped 51 on you in a Game 7. But what you said to me is exactly what it is about the process. It's not a process. It's about drafting well. Because the Golden State Warriors built what they built, not on top 3 picks, top 2 picks, or losing on purpose and collecting picks, is they drafted really well. Steph Curry and Klay Thompson were a little bit later lottery picks. Draymond Green was a second-round pick. Harrison Barnes was their highest draft pick, if you think about it. But what did they do with those guys? They developed. So drafting's easy. Developing is the hard part.
But that's not the Instagram piece that was important of yesterday. Let me give Woj the final word on Philly. And by final, I mean only for this moment. We have all morning long to continue to dive into this. But Woj, as you hear this conversation, usually I say things and then you point out the ways in which I'm making no sense. So feel free if that's the way you see it. The final word on Philly for the moment.
Yeah, Alan's talking about the process and the Fultz Jason Tatum trade. The process was essentially over by them. Sam Hinkie was gone. Brian Colangelo was brought in with the idea that they were going to try to start winning. They clearly made a mistake in that draft. Danny Ainge wanted Jason Tatum. He knew that he could have stayed at 3 and gotten him. But ultimately, I think the process was a shorter window than people really want to remember. But the moniker stayed with it. And listen, you're trying to get a bunch of high picks. No, history shows you're going to miss on a few of them. Most teams do. But can you get that 1 or 2 great players with a lot of at-bats, so to speak? They did get that with Embiid. Certainly Ben Simmons was an all-star player, an all-NBA player until his career took a different turn. But they hit out enough of them to build a contender. But certainly, again, Joel Embiid's window and the ability to put players around him while he's in his prime, it's not going to go on for much longer. This was a key season for them to try to break through. And Boston's got a better team. Boston's got the deepest, most talented team in the NBA. Philly still got them to 7 games, but just not quite enough.
Yeah, and Boston now is actually the favorite to go on and win the championship. Thank you for watching ESPN on YouTube. For live streaming sports and premium content, subscribe to ESPN+.